Based on anthropology from Oxford.
You're a close guy.
If I had the honor of doing that,
I personally only wear.
we've had places that be very respectful and humble.
Yeah, I try that. I think it's more classic.
I do too. But I have so much with a nice red sweater.
Yeah, well, if that's what you think. Yeah. I have like a wish list and it's like the same colors.
Should I pin her?
Yeah.
Terrible. That is my wish list. What does it say? It's like,
Okay, everybody.
I'm going to unmute you.
Yeah. Boker Tov, Leah. Hi, Leah.
yeah, mine is blue.
Good, how are you? Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Where are you? Oh, wow, cool. You know, I live there most of the time now. Yeah. On 69th and Collins. Where are you? 71st and Collins? We're neighbors. That's cool. We have to go for a dinner next week. That's funny. I didn't know that. I just found out that Leah lives 2 blocks from me. Cool. Okay, we're going to start in a minute. First of all, before we start, I would like to welcome, we have a new colleague that just arrived, Fatyela Arbe. I hope I pronounced your name all right. Fatyela just arrived from Bahrain, and she's an author, a peace activist, and an athletic champion.
Wow.
So thank you for being with us and joining us, and we'll hear from you through the time together. So thank you for coming all the way to be with us, and I hope you enjoy the program. The other, just very briefly, some people have been asking, it's Friday night services, for the Jewish people and non-Jewish people, if you want to have Shabbat dinner, there's a Chabad house that has, they're very open, you can go for dinner. We have to check, there's a synagogue on George Street, it's like a 3-minute walk from here, but during the summer, sometimes they have Shabbat dinner and services on Cowley Road. So during the afternoon, I'll try and find out where they'll be located, but they're very open, and if anybody wants to drop by and have Shabbat, I think they will probably meet around 7:30, I believe, for about a 30-minute Shabbat service, and then they eat dinner at about 8. So we'll check it out. And Monday. So, Al-Shadei, I think it's important, we're all here, if you can speak about what's happening on Monday.
Sounds good. So on Monday, we're all going to be going to London. The bus is going to come at 7 a.m., so everybody needs to show up.
Can I ask you a question? What time do we start at the CST?
9:30.
Okay. 7?
It's rush hour. It says 7:30 in the program, so anyone not in this room is going to see 7:30.
I know.
We should put a text.
You've changed it?
No, I'm saying 7 because everyone's going to show up at 7:30.
7 o'clock?
So just show up.
Jewish time.
7 o'clock, aim to be there. Yeah, we'll have packaged breakfast for everyone to take. And then if there's anyone going to London over the weekend and you guys just want to meet us at the first spot at CST, we'll send out the address. And then we're going to go to the museum afterwards. There's an exhibition on anti-Semitism. We're going to go to that. And then afterwards, everyone's free to do whatever they want until 7 p.m. 7 p.m. is when the bus comes back here.
7 p.m. it leaves London?
Correct.
Where would it leave from?
It'll leave from the last spot that dropped us off, Russell Square.
So roughly what time will we end with the group and start our free time?
Latest like 3 p.m.
Oh,
So
okay.
everyone will have like 4 or so hours, have dinner, do whatever they want to do in London.
So, and you could come back on the bus on Monday afternoon, and if you elect to stay in London and have dinner, or go see a show, or whatever, you can come back on your own. You know, there's regular buses, they're not expensive, and there's a train that takes about 45 minutes.
But people need to be careful about the strikes.
Yes, it's a good idea. Ben is mentioning there's a labor dispute, so I think Saturday there's a strike for some of the train services, but not the bus service. So you have to be mindful that, check for industrial action and how that's going to affect transportation. Okay, anything else? Okay, cool. All right, so Leah, thank you for your patience and and joining us and being patient. We're starting a bit late. So thank you very much. Leah Sobol is a Hispanic American and an Israeli living on Collins Avenue. And has been active for more than 15 years, working on the ground in Israel, the United States, and Latin America, working with thousands of global Latino journalists and media influencers. In 2012, she founded Fuente Latina, the only organization of its kind that ensures global Hispanic media professionals with facts that they need to deal with the breaking news and to accurately cover Israel, the Jewish people, the Jewish world, and the Middle East, regardless of their geographical location, working in Spanish. She recently launched Activista Media, the first ever bilingual English and Spanish digital news brand that directly engages the next generation of English-dominated non-Jewish U.S. Latino journalists, influencers, and online news, which is consumers about Jews, anti-Semitism, and Israel. She's headquartered in Miami with offices in Tel Aviv, Madrid, Los Angeles, and Mexico City, and has brought more than 330 journalists to Israel, facilitated 65,000 accurate TV, radio, and print stories reaching millions of Latinos around the world, and their work has resulted in 2 TV Emmy awards. Leah is the National Security Education Program Fellow and received an Arabic language certificate from the American University at Cairo's Arabic Language Institute. She has a BA in Middle East History from Dickens College in Massachusetts, in Security Policy Studies from George Washington University, and has completed coursework for her doctorate degree at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Leah is fluent in English, Spanish, Hebrew, and Arabic. Today, Leah will be speaking in English. And the title of her talk is Strategies for Countering Digital Media Anti-Semitism. So Leah, thank you so much for being with us again. The floor is yours.
Pleasure, thank you. So how many people am I speaking to, since I can only see
I'm going to try and turn it around. There's about 40 people in the room. Uh-oh.
Hi everyone. Good afternoon.
This thing came out. Uh-oh.
Push the camera forward, it's showing only the wall.
Did I just mess this up?
So,
This came out.
so Charles, I hope your Spanish is improving now that you moved to the capital of Latin America.
You know, actually it is. And you know what? Miami reminds me of Montreal in the 1980s. It's really a bilingual city. So it's kind of cool. I grew up in a bilingual city. So yeah, I'm learning slowly.
Good. Okay, well, thank you everyone at ISGAP for allowing me to come back and speak for now what is my second year. And especially thank you to Charles.
Charles pulled the plug.
Sorry, 1 second. Can you try speaking to us again? Oh, nope.
No, now it should be.
Okay, all right. Let's try again.
1, 2, 3.
Perfect, we're good.
Can I turn it around
Okay.
slowly?
So,
Yeah.
again, thank you everyone at ISGAP, specifically Charles. I am speaking to you today as a practitioner. Somebody that works in the field with thousands of global journalists, both in Spanish and in English, working to proactively counter anti-Semitism in the media. And that's not an easy feat given the challenges that we have, which I'll briefly go through. But what I want to do today in my presentation is share with you the results of a study of U.S. non-Jewish millennial and Gen Z perceptions of anti-Semitism as they see it through the information and news that they consume online, which is what we call digital media. Because I know you're probably spending a lot of time talking about the origins and the manifestations of anti-Semitism. As a practitioner, I'm thinking on a daily basis, how can I combat that? And what I want to share with you are some of the experiences that we have on a daily basis and some of the results that we found in a recent study that we did to try to really drill down what is going on, what are we seeing online, and then how can we take the public opinion and research studies that are being done and translate those into strategies. So I'm going to dig right into my presentation because I have a lot of content to share. So what we saw in 2000 in last year, in May of 2021, the Gaza operation that took place was very much a game changer for anybody that worked in media. It was coupled with the pandemic, a dramatic shift from what we call legacy traditional media to digital media. And the same things that we were seeing in traditional media, the same tropes, the same disinformation, the same biased information had now all manifested itself and tripled online. In the field that I work with Hispanics, the problem is that Hispanics are the #1 users of social and digital media. And as a result, they are the #1 targets of disinformation. And what we're seeing is the disinformation that they are targeted with is exceedingly fueling anti-Semitism. And I will show this in the perceptions that we gleaned from the research that we did last year. Whether it's in English or in Spanish, we're seeing it in a variety of different languages. But in the Hispanic world, why it should matter to all of us is because there are more than 500 million Spanish speakers worldwide. In the United States, where a lot of our work is focused, Hispanics are slated to make up more than 30% of the total US population. They're very ethnically diverse and they're becoming incredibly politically active. Their voices really do matter. And collectively, we are not speaking to them enough. And that is what I try to do on a day-to-day basis through mainstream media. It's very hard to do in media per se, because what has happened since I started doing this in 2012 is that you have a lot of funding that is poured into the media market by what we call state-sponsored media. So some of my biggest competitors on a daily basis in trying to combat narratives on anti-Semitism are Iran's Hispan TV or Qatar's Al Jazeera and AJ Plus, which is their digital platform. Russia Today and RT in Spanish is probably the biggest competitor in the Spanish language market field. They're pouring millions into winning Latino hearts and minds. And a lot of the work that they do, as I see it on a daily basis, is actually propaganda and disinformation with an intentional purpose of dividing our society, of fueling anti-Semitism, of generating anti-Zionist sentiments. Now, I could spend this entire hour that I have with you, or less so, of just looking at all the different ways and forms that anti-Semitism manifests itself in Hispanic media, but I don't want to do that. It continues to this very, very day. We see it every single day. It's published today still in traditional newspapers, as it was last year in the Miami Herald. We also see it in television and in digital format. This is a journalist that we are working with who about a year ago asked the question, is there a Latin American QAnon? And as he started to investigate, he found a very, very significant dark web of neo-Nazi activity online and even fake media that was set up to spread just blatant anti-Semitic tropes, as the image below shows. And when he outed these networks and some of these groups, which then YouTube took down, his life was threatened, and he's a very popular journalist in Argentina. So we're seeing that journalists themselves are being targeted. We know that news consumers are being targeted, and we know that this is happening all day without any real regulation, either on behalf of the media or on social media networks. Now, the messages that these state-funded outlets are distributing are very classic in terms of anti-Semitic tropes. A lot of blaming Israel. They don't even call Israel by name. They call Israel Zionist or Zionist entity. And it's not just Iran or Russia. We see it in Venezuela and in other places. But what we did notice in the last year or so is that since these are very savvy communicators that are very, very good at strategic communications, that their own narrative about Israel has taken on more of a progressive tone. So when they're trying to discredit Israel or Jews publicly through their content, they're talking about it through a frame of social justice, as they very much during the George Floyd riots in the United States, we saw Hispan TV in Spanish all of a sudden talk about the world cries for George Floyd, but who cries for the assassinated Palestinians, and trying to tie the two and show parallels between the two groups. So we see that they are changing their form of communication, their messaging, their framing to reach that younger millennial Gen Z audience that is very passionate about social justice issues and predominantly consumes content that has more of that narrative lens, that progressive lens, I'm sorry. Now, the problem from our standpoint in trying to talk about anti-Semitism, and I'm going to address Israel as part of it, but I really want to focus on the anti-Semitism part of it because they are distinct to some degree when you're talking about media, is that if you're looking from the Israel or the Jewish community standpoint, we're just not equipped to be communicating, whether it's financially or technologically, we're not leveraging digital media in the same way for whatever reason, and there are a variety of reasons, but I don't want to spend time on that today. They're not, when I say we, the collective we of Jews of Israel, even anti-hate groups, not leveraging these platforms in the same way that we see Al Jazeera or Russia Today, or even the Iranians. And the numbers, the proof is in the numbers. I mean, if you go on social media, you can see that they're investing in marketing, they're investing in advertising, they're promoting their content, and the numbers are incredible. The number of views that they're able to get, from our standpoint where we are, it's nearly impossible without a significant sum of money being put behind it. So the challenge really is it's a race to get to these audiences because it's not the same as traditional media. You don't just turn on the media, the TV anymore, and what's on the evening news is on the evening news. You have to pay to get into people's feeds, and what's in people's feeds is very curated. It's very much a different ballgame than it was 2 years ago. And we're still learning how to get into people's feeds, and how then once we're there, how do we talk to them about anti-Semitism? How do we talk to them about the issues that you're all seated around the table to discuss? The first and most important thing in communication is we have to know who our audience is. Who are we speaking to? What are we saying? You know, what do they care about? And in order to better frame what we're trying to say. And this is very, very true for anti-Semitism. I mean, if you look at the online environment today, we're talking about millennials and Gen Zers. And according to this Pew study from last year, I don't want to say the majority, but a large percentage of those that are online tend to lean towards more democratic, say they side more with the Democratic Party, or they're more liberal, maybe undecided. You definitely see a higher number with high school or some college education. You see more women on different platforms than men, but you also see a lot of groups of affinity: the Asian Americans, the Hispanic Americans, and the African Americans. Now, Fuente Latina traditionally works in Spanish, and what we saw after the conflict of last year was that there's about 20 million, an estimated 20 million Hispanics in the United States, what we call English dominant, meaning they like their content culturally framed for them, but they consume the bulk of the content that they're accessing online in English. And we saw that many of these state-funded networks that I discussed earlier were targeting them as well through their English language platforms, showing the intersection between Palestinian issues or alt-right issues, together with social justice issues. And when it came to anti-Semitism, or Israel even, there's nothing there. I mean, there's nothing on the I would say offensive there. There's nobody there communicating specifically with non-Jewish audiences. When I surveyed the entire social media sphere after the conflict, I found a lot of groups and individuals and outlets who were trying to talk to non-Jewish audiences, but when you start to see Jews beat up in broad daylight in the United States and anti-Semitism at historic levels, we had to ask the question, if we are all talking in digital media and if we are all using social media to try to get a message out, what is going on? And after the May conflict, as a communicator that's been doing this for 15 years, I stopped and I had to ask the question because I'd never seen anything like that. I'd never seen two parallel conflicts being fought at the same time, one in the ground and another one online. And this is the future of as we started to see at the beginning of the week. And so it really begged the question, why can't we get the message out about anti-Semitism? As somebody that works with hundreds of journalists on a daily basis, I can tell you, it is a very much an uphill battle to get them to publish anything about anti-Semitism. We know from young individuals that are trying to talk about their Jewish identity online, that they are being shot down and they are being bullied. And we don't understand why, we didn't understand why. And I think that following the study that we commissioned last year, we're starting to understand, and there's also been some subsequent studies done this year that found similar findings with regard to non-Jewish young American perceptions of Jews and anti-Semitism. And I want to share those with you today, some of those findings, not all of them, some, and then give you some of the recommendations that we found based on the research that we did. So what we did is we started off with focus groups. So this was all done virtually, 18 to 35 Americans of different ethnic groups, because we wanted to test not only messages, but we wanted to test content. If we're talking about media, we're talking about digital media, we're talking about social media, it's not just the written word anymore. Now it's the verbal, now it's all about the video, now it's all about the reel. And so we wanted to understand, is it the messenger that's wrong? Is it the message that's wrong? Is it the delivery that's wrong? What is going on? There's a lot of organizations investing a lot of money in content to speak to non-young Jews about Israel, Jews, anti-Semitism. Why is none of that having an impact? And so we were able to, as part of the focus groups, the 14 focus groups that we did, 10 were focused on Israel, 4 were focused exclusively on anti-Semitism, and 98 individuals participated in those total 14 focus groups. After the focus groups, we wanted to validate or discredit what we had found in these 2-hour conversations that we had had with the individuals, and what we found was the same. There wasn't very little difference from the focus group findings than what we found in the poll that we did after the interviews. So I want to share with you some of those. We hired a Miami-based firm, and I want to share with you what we found. In terms of content of anti-Semitism, when we look at the content that's out there, for the bulk of it, when we tested it amongst those 98 non-Jews, and I'm talking about Americans, did not resonate with them. We received a lot of feedback on why, and it's very important feedback because it breaks away from the traditional forms of communicating through media about anti-Semitism and Jews. Their perceptions of the world, their worldviews are very different. How they consume media is very different. Doing this 15 years, we have to now shift how we communicate and how we frame these issues because of the worldview of the audiences that we're trying to engage and target. And what we found is that there's content that is to talk about anti-Semitism and the Holocaust and Israel that resonates with Jews. And then there needs to be content, because there is very much a lack of, to talk to young non-Jewish Americans about the Holocaust, Israel, and Jews. And we were able to gauge effectiveness of speakers, we were able to gauge effectiveness of content. We not only showed content about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism that is produced from non-Jewish organizations, from Jewish organizations, but we also showed content that's being produced from some of the providers of disinformation that they're putting out there. And we wanted to see what is more persuasive. What is more effective in educating these young audiences, and then how can we take the lessons of what works and what doesn't, particularly what works, and apply it now moving forward in the communications sphere to be able to communicate a better message about Israel, anti-Semitism, and the Jewish community. So what we found by and large is not surprising. There's no groundbreaking results from this study, but it for the first time, and at least in the spheres that I work in, we were able to put a finger on what was the problem. And I think that's what's really important about the study and what I'm sharing with you today, is that Jews in America are seen as white. And as a white individual, you cannot be discriminated against. And we heard this over and over and over and over and over again, that we're white, we are not discriminated against. Their image of a Jew is not of me. Their image of a Jew is of a religious Jew you'd see walking around the streets of New York. They don't know how to identify anti-Semitism. They don't know how to define anti-Semitism. When we showed them social media posts that were clearly anti-Semitic, the majority of the respondents said that that's just bullying and that wouldn't prompt them to act against or call out what they were seeing online. Also very important with regard to what we saw last May is that American non-Jews, when they think of a Jew, they think of an American. They don't think of a European, they don't think of an Israeli, they think of an American. And in terms of messaging and content, when we're talking about global anti-Semitism, we learned a lot of valuable lessons in how to communicate about the Holocaust and specifically about American anti-Semitism to young Americans. We did a split sample. We asked this in a variety of different ways. The bottom line is because Jews are white, we're not seen as being discriminated against. We asked who faces the least amount of discrimination, it's the Jews. We asked who faces the most amount of discrimination, it was the African Americans, and at the very bottom was Jews. But Americans, these young Americans that participated in the study by and large, don't have a lot of knowledge, which is actually a positive point because it leaves the door open for communicating as long as we can get the message right. When we asked why Jews face the least amount of discrimination, first and foremost, we're white. Second, which is one of my challenges, is we don't hear about Jews or anti-Semitism talked about in the media. Anti-Semitism isn't a problem anymore. Some think, in a lot of the conversations that we had, young people, educated people, everybody that participated in this study had at least a high school degree, and the majority are studying in college. A lot of them believe that the Holocaust ended in World War II, that anti-Semitism ended with the Holocaust, and that it doesn't exist today. Some even said that there's a lot of Jews in power. One of the frightening things that we encountered in the conversations of the focus groups is that there were a lot of young people saying tropes without even knowing that they were saying tropes. And that requires a whole strategy of education and communication to get them to understand that what they're saying is definitely bigoted and disrespectful. But again, the good news is that they don't know. The bulk of what we found is they don't realize they're saying tropes, and they don't know a lot about Jews. We forget a lot in the communications industry that Jews make up more than 2% in the United States, at least, and so most people don't know a Jew. They don't know what a Jew looks like, and so it's their frame of reference sometimes are comical shows like The Simpsons or Family Guy or South Park, which is absurd. But that's the reality. It requires a communication strategy to get them, to educate them, and to get them to realize that anti-Semitism exists to this day. When we ask them, do they have favorable opinions of Jews or Israel? Again, the good news is that they don't hate Jews or Israel. What was very clear from the conversations and also the poll is that they don't know. So again, like 31% didn't recognize it or don't know, but you do have very somewhat favorable large percentage. What we do know from the conversations and from the poll is that, and this leads back to why young Americans don't believe that Jews are discriminated against, is because they see Jews as a religious group and not as a racial group. And therefore, as a religious group, what we heard in the focus groups was that how can Jews be discriminated against if Judaism is a religion? It's not an ethnicity, although it is, but young Americans don't know that. And so they, by and large, don't see Jews as ethnically diverse or as a racial group, and therefore that leads to that perception that Jews, therefore, are white and not discriminated against. Again, the tropes still very much exist. With all the education that's going on, with all the communication that's been going on, there's still this overwhelming type of perception that Jews wield a lot of power. And we heard this in the conversations that we had with these young individuals saying tropes and not even really realizing that there was anything wrong with that. We also realized in the conversations, we tested the IRA definition on this young population. We spoke a lot about anti-Semitism, and through the conversation, we realized that most young Americans, those that participated in the study and subsequent studies, they don't know what anti-Semitism is. When we talk about anti-Semitism, they really do not have a clear idea of what it entails, how to define it. Their view of anti-Semitism, when we asked them to give us examples, was spray painting a swastika on a house of worship, on a synagogue, or shooting up a temple or synagogue, or beating up a religious Jew in New York. But other than that, they didn't know what was anti-Semitism. So from a message point of view, we wanted to try to see if we were able to get better understanding of anti-Semitism if we broke it down for what it is, which is hatred of Jews. And we started to see a little move in the needle, that there was a better understanding of what anti-Semitism was, which requires a much deeper dive into the language that we use when we're communicating through media to very broad audiences online. Oh, sorry, that was a repeat slide. Do you believe that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state? Yes. So it's not that it's all doom and gloom, but we clearly do have a communications challenge. Now, this is where we start to see a shift that we hadn't seen in previous years. I myself, as a communicator, have not seen this ever before, and we're specifically seeing this amongst Hispanic audiences in America, which is what I'm spending a lot of my time on these days. Do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of Hamas? And remember, this was in August of 2021 after the May conflict. You still have a large percentage of no opinion and don't know, more than 50%, but you do have 21% that say somewhat and very favorable. I mean, I apologize. My screen is being popped here. 26% that say very, very or somewhat favorable, where you have less saying that they don't have a very positive image of opinion of Hamas. So this is challenging, and when you break it down even more so, we provided definitions of who is Hamas and what have they done in the past. And after providing a very clear, concise definition of Hamas that was not biased, it was quite objective. When we asked which one of these is closer to your opinion, Hamas being a terrorist organization or legitimate government defending the Palestinian people, we see here clearly from the Hispanic side that 33%, which was the majority, responded Hamas is defending the Palestinian people. and we heard this time and time again in the conversations that we had in the focus group, particularly with African Americans and Hispanic Americans, is that they very much understand the need for violence. They understand when violence is being used to particularly get attention. We heard this specifically of residents or individuals that are from Puerto Rico, because they feel that their island is being invaded by the United States. And that worldview, again, seeps into their worldview of Jews, this racial identity politics that we're seeing in the United States, as well as that same lens we saw, and I'm happy to share the fuller study, that same lens is being applied to Israel as well. So I'm gonna wrap it up here with what are some of the suggestions that we learned from the focus groups, and then and my recommendations based on the study itself, and then I'll open it up for some questions. But what we learned is that there's particular language being used by different organizations these days in the content and in their messaging regarding Israel, Judaism, and the Holocaust, and that it needs to be a shift in the narrative that we're using. Indigenous is seen as a term that's being co-opted by Jews these days, because what we found in the content is that indigenous is a word that is ascribed to Native Americans in the United States. And again, if Jews are white and they're using the term indigenous to Judea and Samaria, that creates a very large disconnect when communicating with non-Jewish Americans. In terms of communication strategy, we're not going to give up on the word anti-Semitism, but to get our message across to younger audiences, particularly in affinity groups, we need to break down what it is. When we communicate as a community, there's a sense that everybody knows what we're talking about. Clearly, they don't. And as such, we need to be able to break down what it is that we're talking about and put it within context. Also, using words that we use internally, we need to stop using externally because they're just not understood. And in today, in America, an anti-Semite is a racist. An anti-Semite is a bigot. Talking about Jewish ethnicity is very important in our origins, but at the same time, we are an ethnic group. We are a racial group, and so we should be calling things out for what they are. And what we learned by and large of moving forward with digital media anti-Semitism is that we really do need to get to know the audiences that we're engaging. We can't just take content out there that's about anti-Semitism and assume that it's going to resonate with Hispanics or African Americans. It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't. We've tested it. We see it every single day. It doesn't. We need to do a better job at tailoring messages for specific groups and speaking to them within their worldview. One of the things that we found with the Holocaust is that we had a video of a Holocaust survivor watching a video of what was happening in Charlottesville and talking about how she's seeing history repeat itself and watching it through a computer. That caused every single focus group participant to cry. She didn't talk about Europe. She didn't talk about Israel. She spoke about America. She spoke about hatred. She spoke about humanity. And that was a message and a video that very much resonated with non-Jewish Americans that participated in the study. Other videos that talked about global anti-Semitism, that's, as long as we're talking about American anti-Semitism to Americans, they're willing to listen, they're interested, they want to learn. The second that the message starts to talk about global anti-Semitism, they turn off because in their worldview, what do I care about what's happening in Europe when I live here in America? That was the feedback that we received from a lot of the videos. The storytellers have to be authentic. I mean, Holocaust survivors we found are by and large the best communicators in sharing their lived experience about what happened and to ensure that it never happens again. And we know that most young people spend all day online. And just because the pandemic is evolving or shifting to new pandemics, from here on out, everybody's online. And so if we want to engage young audiences, we have to now create content and frame that content adequately and use messages that resonate with these specific audiences. Because although we know online is not reality, they are being very much influenced online, and once they get offline, we need them to reveal certain messages and information. And I will leave it there.
Thank you. So, thank you very much, Leah. So we have many questions, and I think people who would like to ask a question come sit next to the computer so Leah can hear you well. So Chelsea, and then Ben. Oi.
That keeps happening. It's really unstable.
It's happening.
I know.
But it keeps happening.
It's a really unstable water bottle. I know I should. Wait, should I turn the camera or something? I don't know. Hi. First of all, I want to say that was an incredible talk. I think it's an extremely, extremely relevant topic right now. And we really saw that play out in May of 2021, like you said, and the importance of really fighting the battle online as well as in the academic sphere. But my question, so I have one question for you, and it's that currently there's been studies that it's more profitable to post divisive, inflamed, and bigoted content online than content that's essentially promoting peace and tolerance and acceptance of the other, as we like to say at ISGAP as well. So how can we make this kind of content that is fighting against this bigotry more profitable and more effective in our communication? And how can we likewise disincentivize making bigotry so profitable? So
Great question. Thank you. In the news business, we have a saying, if it bleeds, it leads. And that's now trickled onto the online sphere where it's more profitable to publish content that's, promoting bigotry and hate than promoting peace and coexistence. That's never going to change. That will never, ever change, unfortunately, until the social media platforms stop incentivizing. And as long as again, the outlets that I battle are owned by countries, right? So as long as they have unlimited funding to boost their content, then they're going to continue to do it. That's just like the bottom line reality. That money is fueling this, and the social media platforms, as well as the media outlets themselves, state funded or not, have a responsibility to stop it. But they won't. They won't. I see it every single day. They won't stop it.
But is
that's why we did this study, because we need to find what can we do within our power to start to overcome some of that, right? So that was one of the big questions, because I don't have the funds of Iran or Qatar or any, forget what the Russians are doing. But what can we do with the human resources that we have within our community to make sure that we're getting the correct message out to non-Jews? Again, remember, I'm talking specifically non-Jewish audiences. And it really breaks down to they don't hate us. They just don't know us. And so if we're going out there and if you go on social media, you see a lot of angry young and Jewish individuals, right? Okay. Yeah. Because we're frustrated. We're frustrated by everything we're seeing. We're frustrated by the hate. We're frustrated by the bigots. But that doesn't send a message to non-Jewish young audiences, because they don't understand why we're angry. They don't understand why we're angry. So what can we do is that we need to start talking about our issues and tailoring them for non-Jewish audiences. Meaning, I see Ben there. Hi Ben, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Nice. So Ben's one of our favorites, right? He's an educator. He's talking about it in terms of history. He's not getting upset and angry about it. If you go on some social media accounts, and again, if we're talking to Jewish audiences, yeah, let's get angry. We have rights to people. We understand what we're saying to each other. It is so clear that anger doesn't translate once that video or that messenger is seen in a non-Jewish feed. And so it really requires a re-education and a rewiring of our young people. We don't need to put up just the token Ethiopian. We really need to dig into our human resources as a community, both Jewish and non, and get out there and talk. Because we're looking at that content and we're throwing up our hands, and then we're complaining about it in our bubble. We're not then saying, okay, what strategies do we need that the other side are using, that Madison Avenue are using. Like, how do we need to change our mindset when it comes to communicating about our issues to non-Jews.
Thanks. Thank you.
I hope I answered your
Okay. Yeah, you did. Thank you very much. It's very interesting.
Hi, thank you for your talk. It was fascinating. I think I'll probably end up contacting you afterwards with some other thoughts and questions. But the one that I feel like is perhaps a pressing issue for all of us is, and I don't mean to, I'd like to talk about the issue of Holocaust survivors, because it's something that you brought up a couple of times as a very effective means for convincing people that it is an issue, I guess. And I don't mean to talk about Holocaust survivors like they are a tool for us, but their message is an extremely valuable tool. And not to perhaps bum everybody out, but we are approaching the day fairly soon where there's not going to be any of them left around. What do you think we can do in preparation for that point? Do you think it will be similarly effective to just have as much recorded content from them as possible, or should we try and find new methodologies?
I mean, I know there are a lot of organizations invested in finding these new methodologies, even to the degree of like holograms now, right? And like, you know, how do we get those holograms and those videos in the metasphere? You know, when that becomes a more important thing than it currently is. You know, digital content is king, and however, in whichever way forms we can have it, to try to edit it later, so to speak, so that we have those messages in our archives, in our arsenal. I think the more the better. But we are approaching that time, and we even heard it in the focus groups that we did, where young people are like, "Who cares about history? Like that was eons ago. Why do I have to care about that today?" And so, coupled with those messages, with younger spokespeople, with younger communicators who have also faced themselves anti-Semitism. You know, this is going to be what we're going to have available to us to be able to communicate to the next generation. And it is important. We need to continue to think and strategize of the different ways to make it known of what's happening, even once that time has passed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Leah. I'm Gabi Brown. Thanks for your presentation. It's nice to meet you. When my parents were growing up, in their generation, there was obviously discrimination against Jews in America. My father couldn't join the tennis club in his town. When he went to Columbia, there were quotas. Limited number of Jews could be admitted. And his teacher was Lionel Trilling, the first Jew hired at Columbia, who later hired Edward Said, by the way. So we can see that kind of discrimination in their generation. What do you say, even sometimes to Jews who I've heard say, nowadays in America, well, Jews are thriving. They're among the groups who can be measured to be succeeding the most, along with Indians from India and Asian Americans, whites, you know, however we define these categories, come down the ladder, actually, of groups succeeding in this so-called racist, white supremacist society. The whites are actually not at the top if you put people into boxes, and Jews are up there. What do you say, even sometimes to Jews who say this is the best place Jews have ever lived, we're fully integrated into the society, it's not our parents' or grandparents' generation anymore, we ourselves don't witness this kind of discrimination. How do you respond to them?
So I'm a firm believer in picking your battles, right? There's some people we're going to win over in this fight, and there's others that we're not. Ben sees it every single day on social media. But again, if somebody identifies as Jewish, and that was something else that was very interesting about this study, we tried to, just anecdotally, we tried to ensure that there weren't Jews in the focus group because we wanted a clean read, a neutral conversation on issues regarding Jews and anti-Semitism. And one of the boxes that the participants had to tick before being allowed into the group was, are you Jewish? And there were several who ticked that they weren't Jewish, but they felt that they were culturally Jewish. Even they were halachically Jews that didn't identify as Jews, and like in terms of like they didn't want to be characterized as Jews, but culturally they're Jewish, which was fascinating. But this is apparently something everybody is seeing. And it's, again, if you identify as a Jew, then you have a responsibility to your people, or you don't. I mean, we see it every day. It's, again, those that want to be a part of it, yalla. Those that don't, again, we really must pick our battles, because everything we see is escalating, and right now we don't have a solution to stop it. So what I say is, focus on where the possibilities lie, and we need to stop focusing on the haters, because when I did survey the social media sphere, what I found is a lot of the community is focusing, I would say 95% of our resources are focused on talking to 5% of those that know us and hate us. There is a big mushy middle out there that don't know us and want to get to know us, but we're not communicating to them. And I think that's the focus.
Hi, thank you so much. I had an anti-Semitic encounter last night with a Colombiana, and I wanted to talk about it and then ask you a question. So real briefly, was just getting some food, and there was a customer at a Colombian restaurant, and exchanging pleasantries, where you're from, et cetera, and all that kind of stuff. And I told her I was here studying, and et cetera. And then I said it was an anti-Semitism seminar. And she said, "Oh, well, I hate Jews." So here's
What if you were Jewish?
Yeah.
this was last night when I was So
The head of the American States.
You're getting really serious.
yeah, right. So here's there was I tried to think quickly like, what was going on there, and because I just got my food, I was getting ready to leave, and so my response was, there are two professoras, like there's an Argentinian Jewish woman and a Mexican Jewish woman that's here also with me, and so if
Peruvian.
I'm sorry. Yes. So I said they're here with me. So if you hate Jews, you hate people that look like you also. Now here's my question. I don't know. Now I don't know if that was successful. She at least thought about it. I can tell her looking. So here's my question. How much awareness do you think Latino Americans have about Latino Jewish communities around the world, and how important is the cognizance of those communities for combating anti-Semitism in those communities? Thank you.
Very, very, first of all, I apologize that you had that horrific experience, and excellent question. And it's not only to Latin America. First of all, the woman that said that you clearly knew what anti-Semitism was. She's clearly educated, and her comments, came from hate. I mean, that's like, I get called that Jew every day in my work with non-Jewish Hispanics, but rarely do I encounter anybody that says to me, "Oh, anti-Semitism, I hate Jews." So like, clearly you had somebody there that had a real deep-seated hate. And knew what the word meant, because I also say anti-Semitism all day and nobody understands it. So that's one thing. But in terms of Latin America, the image of the Jew amongst Latinos, like the Latin Jew amongst Latin Americans, is the same exact thing that we see in America with Jews. We are seen as a community apart. We are seen as rich, we are seen as privileged, even though we speak the same language, we live in the same neighborhood. We're, just because, there's a gate on our house, we're seen as being very insular, when really it's because of fear and security needs. But that is, all the things that within the Latin Jewish community, and we see this in Europe and we see this in elsewhere, the things that we do to protect ourselves and to avoid risk or harm then is translated by non-Jews in the community as privilege. And so what I hear, and I have almost all of my staff are non-Jewish Latinos. What I heard from all of them when they started to come to work for us is, I don't know any Jews, and those Jews, they're different. Those Jews, I don't know Jews, because they go to their own parties and they go to their own, restaurants. So because of kashrut, or because of the things that make us who we are, we're seen as being different, insular, and exclusionary, which is absolutely not the case. And in the Latino case, what we see in Miami are actually, and we've done focus groups in Miami and in LA, when the US Latino case, which is also in the Latin American case, a lot of non-Jewish Latinos work for Jews. And so their context of the Jew is whoever it is that they work for. So again, all not positive things. The role of Jews is actually, and this is what I'm preaching on my soapbox every day is, we as Jews, we have to get out of it. The problem is we are not known. What people know about us is because they've heard it through the media, they've been told about it from their parents, or they've learned about it in school, Catholic settings. We're not telling our own story. If we don't get out there and talk about, why do you hate Jews? What did a Jew do to you? Do you hate Jews because that's what you were taught to believe? We find that a lot in Latino countries, in Latin American countries, that they were taught to think that Jews killed Jesus in Catholic upbringing. And it's been told from generation to generation that Jews killed Jesus. But they love the Holy Land. So there's this huge opening of being able to speak to them about Jews in Israel, but in most cases we don't take the opportunity when it's there. That's really my message, is that we have a tremendous, not only in Latin America and the United States and Asia, everywhere, we as Jews and our non-Jewish allies really do have a responsibility to show who we truly are. I want to do a Benetton marketing campaign and take Jews of all hues across America, so people who don't know a Jew and what a Jew looks like can get to know it. We don't put ourselves out there enough. We just need to do it more.
Hola Lea, soy Sara de México. A mí sí me hubiera gustado tu plática en español, pero bueno, I'll switch to English now. So I appreciate tremendously the work that you're doing, because as a Jew living in Mexico, our community, and I think I speak for the rest of Latin American Jewish communities, we prefer a lay low approach. Don't do any fuss about us. There's still the thing that we belong to these countries, but we prefer to not be very loud about our presence in those countries. So I really appreciate what you're doing from your trinchera of really telling our stories and doing amazing things. What I want to ask you a little bit, if you can elaborate more, is about Holocaust denial and distortion in Latino communities, because I think it's either go this way. The Holocaust never happened. It's an invention for the Jews to keep the land. Or now the Jews have become the Nazis. Those are the most important narratives that I've seen and encountered in Mexican media about the Holocaust, and I would like to know, what are your thoughts on this?
So, great question. So Mexico is actually, if anybody's been following, which I have, and I'm sure you have, is there's been an incredible uptick of anti-Semitic incidents recently in Mexico, which is there are on occasion, but there was a husband and wife that dressed up as Hitler and Eva Braun and publicly got married, and he was wearing the neo-Nazi the Hitler uniform. And even did the mustache and the Heil Hitler, and it was celebrated on social media. Because on the one hand, it's not clear if people actually understood what the heck was happening there, and because they were celebrating it and was saying what's wrong with it. And even when he was called out for it, he wasn't apologetic. And this is an average Mexican guy. It wasn't some politician. But even the president recently had a very public anti-Semitic incident where he called a very prominent Jewish journalist and opinion writer, that Jew. He called him out for being overly sensitive. and there's
And at the following day,
like,
if I may add, at the following day, he called the whole Jewish community that we have a conservative Hitlerian mind.
yes. So yeah, there's like, it's become part of public discourse, and we're being overly sensitive about what's happening. And again, in Mexico, well, we won't share our thoughts on the Mexican president, but like, we do see this also in Venezuela. We see it sometimes in Argentina. So we see it across Latin America. And again, there are some things you can do. It's very difficult. Like in Mexico, the question is and the lay low approach doesn't work. And I've said this to the Mexican community many times. Because they don't want you to talk publicly about anti-Semitism. So how do you expect the Mexican non-Jewish political elite to know that there's anti-Semitism if it's not even coming from its own Jewish community? So there is a responsibility. I mean, I know these conversations are being had behind closed doors, but with the degree that we're seeing it in Mexico, I think it needs to be taken to a very public level.
Thank you so much.
And there needs to be accountability. There hasn't been accountability, most importantly. That is like, when people like, okay, like maybe I shouldn't be doing that, but yes.
Thank you, Leah.
And what you said is what happened with Corbyn. The British Jewish community stood up and we didn't lay low. And it was successful.
But we sent a tweet.
Right.
Hi. My name is Sarah. I just have a question. I know that the general perception of Jews being white is really harmful to us, but do you think it could be something that comes from the inside, considering I've heard a lot of Jews consider themselves white, like refer to themselves as white and call themselves that?
It's again, I think it comes from a variety of places. I think that like if we say we're white, then we're white. But then you have like a whole new generation of young Jews on social media saying that they're African or they're Eurasian or they're Latin American, where you didn't have that before. Like growing up in St. Louis, Missouri as an Argentinian, I would say I'm white. But that was my own form of protection at the time because there weren't any Latin Jews and people were looking for my horns. So it's a very different reality. If Jews identify themselves as white, that's fine, but the prevailing perception and thought behind why Jews are thought as white in the study that we did, because we really tried to dig down in those conversations, was because we're Jewish and we're rich. And because we're a religious group. The fact that we're a religious group takes out the equation of being racially or ethnically different in the minds of most young Americans.
Okay.
And they don't understand that it's the same. And again, it requires us to say, like, yes, we're Jews. Jew of color doesn't make any sense to non-Jews. If we want to talk about our diversity, we have to communicate that, we have to demonstrate that, and we have to beat people over the head about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Leah, just very quickly, we have a bunch of questions, but I just want to raise an issue about Jewish whiteness. You mentioned like the Benetton PR campaign that you would love to do, highlighting the differences in the Jewish community, and I think that's beautiful and important. But it's also, I think we have to be mindful of sort of kind of falling into the trap of American racialization and racism. And the stubborn fact about Jewish history is that the Ashkenazi Jews in the American imagination, in the U.S. imagination, or in racist formation, is becoming increasingly defined as white. That's the group that was exterminated for not being white. Of all the Jewish communities on the planet, this is the group that has been decimated by racism. So I think, in a way, we have to be careful not to fall into this sort of the erasure of Jewish history and Jewish culture and American racism when we're doing PR campaigns. It's complicated. So, anyways, yeah, okay, just a point.
I agree, Charles, I agree with you 100%, but the first step in getting the message out is to break down the misperception. And so even if that means playing a bit into that current reality, enough so that the message can get across, because what we're finding out now is that because of this reality in America, whatever we're saying, whatever we have been saying is hitting a wall.
Right.
It's just not getting across, and you can see in the focus groups, you can see them just visibly like shut off.
Yeah, I understand.
And so through, we need to start, playing a bit their game, to be able to then get back to what we want to say.
So, yeah, no, I understand, but ultimately, do we promote a Jewish identity with all its richness, or do we promote an American identity to make a short-term political gain? It's a question. All right.
It's a question.
And that ties in so well, thank you, Charles, to my question. I love your presentation. I'm so glad we're asking how do we effectively communicate anti-Semitism to non-Jews. It's a question we should be asking. I want to ask, is there a tension between effective communication and accurate communication? Because of course, like, talking about anti-Semitism, racism goes over really well with people who understand these racial constructs. But is it like, the real form of anti-Semitism? Similarly, like Holocaust survival conversations go off really well. Like, this makes a lot of sense to people, but there's the other leftist form of like anti-Zionism that probably doesn't go over well, and we maybe don't talk about it as much because it doesn't go over well. So I was wondering if you could comment on the pragmatism versus idealism communication.
So it's a question we grapple with every single day. And it all goes down to framing, and again, the audience. And so the idealism, it unfortunately plays a very large part in it because I'm having to toe a political line in what I want to be saying, communicating to a particular audience. But by and large, I mean the first, the answer to your question really and how we're able to address some of these things is actually awareness. So another anecdote from the focus group is that when we showed them videos of the anti-Semitism that was happening in New York, Chicago, LA during the May conflict. And I would say not over 90% of the focus group participants didn't even see any of those reports as they were happening. They were completely unaware that this was happening in a major city. And it's again, the danger of social media is that these platforms are able to tailor content based on the algorithms and interests and other things. And so the content that's speaking against Jews in Israel and talking about the tropes of the Rothschilds and others are able to seep into the feeds of people that have very strong ideals vis-a-vis those that don't and have broader interests and different algorithms. I mean, this is really where our challenge lies, is, do we tweak the message? Can we change the frame to be able to get to these audiences? Do we want to get to everybody? Do we want to get to people specifically that identify as Democrats or independents? I mean, there's a lot of discourse around this progressive ideals in the United States and how it's not sustainable long term, and as people grow older they become more capitalist, more educated, and then their political views change. So, but at least from an educational standpoint, we have to start somewhere, and it's very, very challenging. It's very, very difficult. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think that it's
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Leah. So here's the last question, and we're about to wrap up.
And instead of all of the many questions I do want to ask you, I'll ask you just one quick one. How many people were actually, did you interview in this focus group or in several focus groups? 98. Awesome.
98 individuals. Yeah.
Wow.
Between the ages of 18 and 35.
Thank you. This was fantastic.
So, Leah, good. Leah, on behalf of everybody here, thank you. You're doing amazing work, and the research is really detailed and credible. Where do we get the study? On your website?
I'll send it to you so you can distribute it. So please don't feed it to the media.
Okay,
That's my job.
All right. Cool. Leah, thank you. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for being with us.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Take care.
Yes. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
All right. Everybody have a wonderful lunch. We'll be back here at 2:30 for Joel Finkelstein.
That was great. I also